Hello everyone and welcome back to a new episode of Journal de Sylvie. Today I will be sharing with you how to start a travel journal if you are a beginner or if you are thinking about starting one, or maybe you just started one. So this is not about the setup or the stationery, it's more about the concept and the mindset and how to basically create a travel journal. So the first question we will need to go through is what is the purpose of the travel journal? So in brief, it's a journal to keep everything about the places you visited, the experiences you encountered, all the details of your beautiful adventure. Question number 2 is, what is the traveler's mindset when creating a travel journal? So the answer, I would say, is in one keyword, which is efficiency. So the nature of traveling, you are on the go, makes it almost imperative that you need to be as efficient and as optimized as possible. So this mindset, prime benefit is that it liberates you completely from the pressure of worrying how I will create fancy artistic spreads or how I will lay down my pictures and collage and all of that. This is about efficiency. Moving forward, question number 3 is, what do you input in your travel journal? So there are 2 types of entries in your travel journal. There is the writings and there is the entries of a visual nature. When it comes to writing, you can write about your feelings and thoughts inspired from a special moment that you lived during your trip. You can write as a narrative of your itinerary. So basically you list chronologically the things you did and the places you visited. And the third type of writing, you can be writing the knowledge you acquired during the trip. As for the visuals, it can be printed pictures, printed papers from brochures. It can be handmade sketches or physical items. So now the most important question, how do I start a travel journal using all of these components? Sometimes it can be overwhelming or you just don't know from where to start. So I personally follow 6 guidelines to help me start my pages. And of course, it can be as creative as you want from that point on. But before sharing the guidelines, there are some introduction pages that you need to have in your journal, which basically make sure it lists the country you're visiting and it's dated as well. So you can have a page with your trip checklist, whether you have it printed or you want to just write it down, map, luggage, money, journal, and so on. Second, you need to have a trip calendar. I explained this calendar, it's in details in a previous travel journal setup, but you need to have a trip calendar. Now moving on to the first guideline, and with every guideline I will share a tip or a hack that I personally found useful. The first one is when you write on one side and you leave the visuals on the opposite page. This is a straightforward method. You cannot go wrong with it. It always looks good and it's very easy. So write down anything, any of the 3 types of writings we discussed, and the visual on that side. So the visual, as we mentioned, it can be a sketch like over here, or it can be a printed paper from a brochure. And the hack here is that, if applicable, I like to grab 2 brochures. One I keep intact with my preferred language because I think there is a lot of valuable information in it. And the second one in any language, again, if allowed, to use it or decorate my spread. And it's not only for decorating, actually. It really is somehow in relevance and related to what I'm describing in my writing. So it's an educative illustration somehow. Okay, so the second guideline is called description per picture. So very easy and straightforward way to start your travel journal page. First, lay down your pictures. Somehow you will sort this based on the picture orientation, whether it's portrait or landscape. And once you do that, now you will target in writing every picture to add a description or express your feelings. This will help you to organize your thoughts because your thoughts will be focused on that picture, so you will know from where to start expressing yourself. A tip or a hack here is cutting from the picture the subject of interest, basically treated like a sticker. So in that case, I had this picture here. Obviously, I'm interested in the statue, so I didn't need all the blue skies. I just cut the subject I'm interested in, and this way I was able to fit everything together. And now moving on to the other guideline, which is visuals only. You can write very little to nothing. If you have a picture that represents vividly the experience you lived, you don't really need to feel you have to write. Just looking at this picture brings back vividly the memories you lived. So I look at this spread and I remember the day we visited the Museum of Acropolis, and I didn't feel I need to express more than those pictures. Now, moving on, we have the technique of writing only. Usually this is applicable when the spread is about the knowledge you acquire. So remember, you always learn something when you travel. If you're visiting nature sites, you will learn about nature. If you're visiting historical sites, you will learn a lot of information. And even if you are in a trip for relaxation, you will learn about the food and the people, the traditions, and so on of the place you're visiting. So there is a lot of valuable information that I didn't want to compromise and a risk that I forget it. So I created that spread. The writing only, I highly recommend margins. You probably know that by now if you follow my videos. This looks like it's a page taken from my Commonplace book. If you have watched that video, I always like to have a margin because it helps me to add small abbreviations, annotations, maybe a small drawing. It just helps me to structure the page in a more informative way. So this is an example of you just have to write. Do not feel the pressure. You have to add any visuals to your spread. Just write. Okay, and before last technique is basically adding some physical items to your spread. Obviously, this is something you will do. You may do it during the trip. I personally did this after I came back. I had this little metal tag that is relevant to the topic of the spread. You can also add a wax stamp. It gives a highlight it gives like a dimension to your spread without really a lot of collage. I also have a physical item here, this magnetic bookmark. So physical small items, of course, if it gets bigger or more dimensional, you can always store it somehow in your souvenirs or in your cabinet of curiosity. And as you can see in that spread, I applied the very first technique of writing on one side and visualizing on the opposite. And by the way, you will notice I have a lot of sketched maps in my travel journals. It's really nothing sophisticated. It's not a perfect map. I transferred this from this napkin over here. Once I did this, of course, it looked very plain. So a good tip will be that whenever you sketch, you annotate your sketch. I talked about that in my last video. I really like to create a dashed line highlighting the path that I took because this is basically representing my adventure and the route that we took. Once I do this, I label the places we stopped at. And of course, you can take this to another level and start adding small drawings or add the coordinates of the place and so on. But the sketch annotation brings more information to it because now I look and I see the path that I took. And finally, there is the guideline, and nothing prevents you from combining everything together. So over here, I have this spread that it just came like that. I have everything, all the techniques combined. I have printed pictures, printed papers, couple of small drawings, and the writing technique was the description per picture. So you can always do that as well. And the final tip I have that in the back, in the very back of your travel journal, leave 2 draft backdoor pages. I travel with Post-its. I keep them here because many times you will like to write something real quick, but you are not in the circumstances to allow you take your time and write it properly in your pages. So you will just remind yourself with something for you to do later on. Or maybe someone give you an information and you are in a hurry, you just want to log it. So my plan was once I'm done, I clean up this, but then I realized now I'm going to leave it because first, it was very useful. Second, it's part of my traveling experience. So always keep a page behind the scenes where you log quick notes or reminders. So as usual, I highly recommend starting a travel journal for the fact that we always think we will remember, but in reality we don't. And I think looking back at this, you will be grateful you invested the time and energy to create this, because it will bring back all of the interesting things you lived and learned from traveling. Let me know in the comments what do you think, if you have your own guidelines. I read all the comments, so please feel free to share, and happy journaling.